Today we're looking at one of the strangest and most terrifying cave incidents ever recorded. A story that began as a simple geological curiosity and ended with experienced cavers crawling for their lives beneath a ceiling of fire. What makes this case so disturbing isn't just the danger itself. It's the fact that the warning signs were discovered months before disaster struck. People knew something was wrong. They documented it, they discussed it, they even used it as an educational example. Yet despite all of that, the cave still managed to surprise everyone. And when it finally revealed what had been hiding beneath the surface, it did so with an explosion powerful enough to turn an underground passage into what survivors later described as a giant flamethrower. To understand how this happened, we need to travel back to Kentucky in 1988. Deep beneath the rolling hills and farmland of the state lies the Hidden River Cave System, a sprawling underground network of passages stretching for miles through limestone bedrock. Unlike the dramatic vertical caves often featured in documentaries, much of this system consists of long horizontal corridors, where explorers spend hours walking, crawling, and mapping unexplored territory. For decades, cavers had carefully surveyed these passages, documenting every chamber, stream, and geological feature they encountered. One of those locations was a relatively unremarkable spot known as Station J 247. At first glance, there was nothing special about it. The area contained a shallow depression in the mud floor, measuring roughly 8 feet by 7 feet. Cavers referred to it as a slump pit. From 1976 onward, survey teams passed by the pit repeatedly while mapping the cave. Every single group observed exactly the same thing: water. The depression contained a pool approximately 2 feet deep, and because it appeared completely flooded, nobody paid much attention to it. As far as anyone knew, it was simply a low point where water collected before slowly draining through cracks in the rock. There was no obvious passage beyond it, and no indication that anything unusual was hidden underneath. For more than a decade, the pit remained one of the least interesting features in that section of cave. Then nature intervened. During the spring and summer of 1988, Kentucky experienced severe drought conditions. Rainfall dropped dramatically, surface water levels fell, underground streams shrank or disappeared entirely. Throughout the region, caves began changing in ways that had not been seen for years. Pools dried up, water tables fell. Features that had remained submerged for decades suddenly emerged from beneath the water. On Memorial Day weekend of 1988, a survey team reached Station J 247 and immediately noticed something astonishing. The pool was gone. For the first time in living memory, the slump pit was completely dry. What had once been hidden beneath 2 feet of water was now exposed. News of the discovery spread quickly through the caving community. A dry pit meant opportunity. It meant there might be unexplored passages hidden beneath the area that nobody had ever been able to investigate before. For explorers, few things are more exciting than the possibility of discovering new sections of cave. If the depression contained a continuation, it could potentially connect to other parts of the Hidden River system and expand understanding of the entire underground network. A short time later, experienced caver Phil Odell organized a trip specifically to investigate the newly exposed feature. The objective was simple: descend into the pit and determine whether a previously hidden passage existed beyond it. The journey to Station J 247 required navigating deep into the cave system. Hours passed as the team moved through twisting passages and muddy corridors. Eventually, they reached the pit. Looking down into the depression, Odell noticed something encouraging. Beneath an overhanging section of flowstone appeared to be a narrow opening, approximately 3 feet high and perhaps 2 feet wide. It looked exactly like the sort of lead that cavers dream about finding. There was only one way to know where it went. Odell carefully climbed down into the pit. At first, everything seemed normal. The descent was straightforward and the mud floor appeared stable. But almost immediately, something strange happened. Odell was using a carbide lamp, a common source of light among cavers at the time. Normally, the lamp produced a steady white flame. Instead, the flame suddenly transformed. It became bright yellow and stretched several inches longer than normal. Even stranger, the flame appeared detached from the lamp itself, floating unnaturally above the burner. Odell stared at it in confusion. Something was clearly wrong. Then he began feeling the effects. Within seconds, dizziness set in. Breathing became difficult. His lungs seemed unable to draw enough air despite repeated breaths. The cave walls appeared to shift around him. His balance deteriorated rapidly. He attempted to move and found himself stumbling into the sides of the passage. Years of experience immediately told him what was happening. The atmosphere in the pit was dangerous. Without wasting another second, he turned around and climbed back toward the higher passage. By the time he reached safety, he was struggling to maintain coordination. His companions helped him sit down while he recovered. Fortunately, after several minutes in normal air, the symptoms gradually disappeared. His breathing returned to normal. The dizziness faded. The immediate danger had passed. But everyone now understood that the pit contained something far more dangerous than they had expected. To verify their suspicions, the group conducted a simple test. A candle was lowered into the depression. Within 15 seconds, the flame went out. The result was undeniable. Whatever atmosphere existed at the bottom of the pit could not support combustion. More importantly, it could not support human life. Further investigation revealed the likely explanation. Carbon dioxide, a gas heavier than normal air, had accumulated inside the depression. Because the drought had lowered water levels, the gas trap had been exposed for the first time in years. Anyone entering the pit risked oxygen deprivation within minutes. News of the discovery spread quickly. Throughout the summer, Station J-247 became a strange attraction among cavers. Teams visiting the area often stopped to observe the phenomenon for themselves. Some demonstrated it by lowering candles into the depression. Others discussed the unusual atmospheric conditions and speculated about what might lie beyond the narrow opening beneath the flowstone. It became a fascinating example of how dangerous cave environments could be. Yet despite the warnings, despite the accident reports, and despite the demonstrations, nobody realized that the pit contained an even greater danger. Because hidden beneath the carbon dioxide was something nobody expected. Something that would transform a routine cave expedition into one of the most terrifying underground incidents ever recorded. 4 months later, on the 8th of October 1988, 4 experienced cavers entered Hicks Cave with a specific mission. They planned to collect samples from underground streams to better understand the hydrology of the cave system. The team consisted of Tom Allers, Duke Hopper, Larry Peterson, and Barbara Graham. All of them were experienced. All of them understood cave hazards. None of them expected what was waiting ahead. After descending through the entrance and making their way thousands of feet into the cave, they eventually approached Station J-247. The drought still persisted. The pit remained dry. The team stopped several feet away from the depression while preparing their equipment. Packs were removed, sample containers were organized, everything seemed routine. Then someone noticed a strange smell. It wasn't gasoline. It wasn't natural gas. It wasn't any odor they immediately recognized. The smell lingered faintly in the passage, unusual enough to notice, but not alarming enough to stop the expedition. Duke Hopper moved toward the pit, carrying a sample bottle. His carbide lamp burned normally. There were no strange flame changes like the ones Phil Odell had observed months earlier. No obvious warning signs. Hopper was only a few feet from the rim when something extraordinary happened. A bright blue fireball suddenly appeared near the ceiling, directly in front of him. For a brief moment, everyone froze. The glowing sphere hovered in the darkness like something impossible. Hopper later thought his lamp had malfunctioned, but before anyone could react, the entire passage erupted. A tremendous whoosh exploded through the cave as flames ignited across the ceiling. The blast instantly extinguished every carbide lamp. Darkness vanished and was replaced by flickering blue fire. The ceiling became a sheet of flame. Heat slammed into the group like a physical force. Peterson and Graham immediately turned and fled deeper up the passage. Hopper and Allers were closest to the explosion and found themselves trapped beneath the burning gases. Flames rolled overhead. The sound was deafening. The entire section of cave resembled an enormous underground furnace. Realizing that heat rises, both men dropped to the floor where the air remained marginally breathable. Then they began crawling. Inch by inch, they dragged themselves through the passage beneath a ceiling of fire. Every movement carried them farther from the inferno behind them. Above them, blue flames continued roaring through the darkness. The heat was intense enough to burn exposed skin. The air felt like it belonged inside an oven. Yet somehow they kept moving. 40 feet, then 50. Finally, the flames began receding behind them. When they stopped and looked back, what they saw was unforgettable. The slump pit appeared to be a giant burner. Flames stretched from wall to wall above it. The fire roared continuously as gases fed the blaze. The site looked less like a cave and more like the inside of a refinery accident. Eventually, the group reunited farther up the passage. Shaken but alive, they assessed their situation. Much of their equipment had been abandoned near the pit. Nobody was interested in recovering it. Their only concern was escape. Using the remaining lights, they navigated back through the cave and eventually reached the surface hours later. Once outside, they examined their injuries. Hopper had suffered burns to his face and hands. Others experienced minor burns and heat exposure. Amazingly, everyone survived. In the weeks that followed, investigators tried to determine exactly what had happened. Theories ranged from methane accumulation to natural gas seepage to contamination from connected cave systems. No explanation could be proven conclusively. What everyone agreed on was that the gases had accumulated silently inside the pit and remained undetected until Hopper's carbide lamp provided the ignition source. The warning signs had existed for months. Yet, nobody anticipated an explosion. The cave had first tried to suffocate explorers. Then it tried to burn them alive. And that is what makes the Hicks Cave incident so memorable. Not simply the explosion itself, but the fact that danger revealed itself twice in completely different forms. First as invisible bad air, then as a hidden fuel source waiting for a spark. It remains one of the strangest cave incidents ever documented, and a reminder that underground environments often conceal hazards that even experienced explorers cannot predict until it is almost too late.